thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope everybody's staying safe from the virus and all the craziness that goes along with it. My name is David Lang, and I worked for Accordance for a long time, so I'm used to teaching how to do things in Accordance. I've recently started to develop a YouTube teaching ministry, and that's what you're seeing here with all the funny captions and looks on my face. And the reason that I have that up is because I want to talk about the benefits or the need for studying Hebrew. I think sometimes you're either the gung-ho language person that says, yeah, of course we study Hebrew, or you're the person that goes, Hebrew, that sounds really hard, I don't want anything to do with it. And so what does studying the Hebrew do for us? What can you learn from the Hebrew? And the reason that I've got the YouTube channel up is I've got a couple of YouTube videos, specifically this one on what is a helpmate and this one on waiting for love, where I'm exegeting the story of Adam and Eve, the creation story. And in both of those videos, I give a little bit of insight from the Hebrew. And so they're good examples of how you can use the Hebrew to bring out nuances in the text without implying that, you know, an English Bible is worthless, or that that you can't really know what the Bible says if you don't read Hebrew. Of course, we'd never say anything of the sort, but they offer a good balance of insights from the Hebrew without going too far, which of course some people do. So with that, let me go to the document here that I've created for you all. This is a Accordance user tool, and when you receive it, you'll just double click it and it should install in your user tools, and you should see it in your list of user tools. So it's down here at the bottom of mine. And it is essentially meant to be kind of a crib sheet for you after the fact, so that the things that I show you about Hebrew in this webinar will be something that you can kind of piece together and follow up on. So this document contains links to the YouTube videos at the beginning, and then links to various tutorials. And the tutorials are also something that you will be getting before anybody else does. These will eventually get released in Accordance 13 for everybody. But I've written 3 new tutorials for this webinar that you will have access to, and I've got links to those tutorials within the user tool. So you'll see those either from the user tool or within the tutorials menu itself. Tip advantages of tagged Hebrew and Amplify-a search Hebrew, those are 2 new ones. And searching for Hebrew letters, searching Hebrew by letters, that's new. And when you get those tutorial files, you'll just double click those and they should install correctly for you as well. And if they don't install correctly, contact Mark, don't contact me. All right, so you're welcome for that, Mark. All right, so let me go to the beginning of this document and talk a little bit about what can you learn from the Hebrew. Why do we want to dig into the Hebrew? Well, someone has said, and like most great quotes, it gets attributed to lots of different people, that reading the Bible in translation is like kissing your new bride through a veil. And so you can experience something of the kiss, but it's not the same as not having the veil in the way. And so a translation is a bit like a veil over the text. We're a step away from the original text. And so studying the Hebrew gives us sort of direct access into the original text, and we can pick up on subtle nuances in the text. We can pick up on wordplay, literary artistry, all kinds of things that may be able to be conveyed in translation, but translations are trying to communicate the overall meaning of the text in the target language, and they can't always do that and preserve every Hebrew idiom. You know, you can't translate a Hebrew idiom literally into English and expect an English reader to understand it, and so on. So there's a difference between being able to read in translation and being able to access the original text. All right, let me get rid of that. And let's look at the ESV with Strong's. Genesis 2:18 we're looking at, and this is one example of a couple of things that I brought out in these videos that I've linked to show how you can gain insight from the Hebrew. The first is the phrase "a helper fit." When God sees for the first time that there's something in creation that's not good, he declares that he's going to create a helper fit for Adam, or a helper suitable, or a helper corresponding to. There are lots of different translations of this particular Hebrew phrase, and that's because it's an unusual Hebrew phrase. So here I've got I'm sorry?
David, we cannot see your full screen right now, so whenever you're ready, you can close your video.
Okay, let me turn that off. Is that better?
Okay, thanks. Yes, thanks.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so looking at the phrase "ezer kenegdo," ezer means help, and kenegdo is actually a conglomeration of two different prepositions and then the suffix him. So "ke" means like or as, and then "neged" means opposite or in front of. It's not opposite in the sense of totally different. It's opposite in the sense of you're standing and facing someone. And so this is kind of an odd way of saying something in Hebrew, and it's what gives rise to so many different translations of that phrase in English. And the ability to be able to explore those kinds of word relationships in Hebrew is very helpful. Now, in the user tool, I ask, well, why not just use English Bibles with key numbers? And there we go. And I explain here that English Bibles with key numbers can give you a lot of insight into the original Hebrew. I can position my cursor over helper, and you can see down in the instant details, I get the meaning of the word, and then we have the cross highlighting with the Hebrew if you happen to have the Hebrew in parallel. So I can get a lot of information this way. But when I go to fit, notice how it only highlights neged in the middle of kenegdo. And the phrase fit for him actually translates this whole Hebrew phrase. But the "ke," when I hover over that, there's nothing corresponding in the English, and the "o," there's nothing corresponding in the English. Now that's merely a limitation of the English tagging. We potentially could tag this more granularly and so on, but we've gotten these key number Bibles from various sources, some of which Accordance has control over, and some of which they don't. So you're kind of stuck with what you've got with the ESV and the other key numbered Bible texts, English Bibles. So in this case, they don't tend to tag common English words or common words like prepositions and suffixes and so on. So you just don't quite get enough information in this particular case. And we see something similar in verse 20. The man gave names to all livestock, and to the birds of the heavens, and to every beast of the field, but for Adam there was not found a helper fit for him. Now notice when I'm hovering over the "to" and the "for," nothing's highlighting over here, nothing's showing up in the instant details. Again, it's because this English Bible with key numbers has not tagged common words with key numbers? Well, in this case, it's actually an important thing for me to realize that 2, 2, and 4 are all the same Hebrew preposition. So here we have la, that's the 2. You can see it says 2 down there as the meaning of this preposition. 2, all of the birds, all of the livestock, and 2, all of the birds, and 2, all of the beasts, and then and to Adam. But we wouldn't say and to Adam there was not found a helper fit. We'd say and for Adam there was not a helper fit. So the English naturally translates this preposition differently than this preposition, even though they're the same preposition, because it's trying to put this into good English. But what we sort of lose in translation is the drama of this particular verse, which is actually showing that Adam is giving names to this group of animals and that group of animals and that group of animals, and then he turns to consider himself, and that's when he realizes that he has a need for a helper fit for him. So little things like that, you know, these are not magical secrets that are getting lost in translation. They're just little nuances, but they enable us to see what's going on in the Hebrew. And key number Bibles, for all that they offer, tend not to cover common words. They don't tend to communicate Hebrew word order. So if Hebrew word order happens to be important in a particular case, you're not going to see that from the key number Bible by itself. And then English words that do not directly translate Hebrew words are not always clear. So the English translation may supply words that are not in the Hebrew. And if you're not working with the Hebrew, you're not necessarily going to see that. Okay, and there's a tutorial here, Advantages of Tagged Hebrew, which basically will go over those two examples and show you the advantage of using the grammatically tagged Hebrew text. All right, so I've made my case for why Hebrew is important. Let's talk about the basics of Hebrew searching. So when I'm just going to switch my search text from ESV with Strong's to Hebrew so that I can now search the Hebrew text. And when you do a word search of the Hebrew, vowels are optional. So if I enter BRA for bara, I can do an unpointed search. You can see the quick entry here gives me the option to do an unpointed search, or I can actually pick particular pointings. But I'm just going to do the unpointed search, and we'll hit return and get our results. But notice I didn't have to enter the vowel points. Now let's say that I want to find bara with these particular vowel points. Well, I can select this and I can copy and I can paste, and now I have the vowel points in there. But if I hit return, we're going to see I have 54 occurrences. If I hit return, I still get 54 occurrences, even though I've put the vowel points in. And the thing to be aware of is that even if you put the vowel points in, Accordance ignores the vowel points. The reason that we do that is because we don't want a brand new Hebrew student to type a seireh instead of a segol and all of a sudden his search doesn't work. So we just ignore the vowel points unless you specifically tell Accordance that you want to pay attention to the vowel points. And to do that, you simply put an equal sign in front of the word. All right, so let's select something different. We'll do Bariah. And so you can see it inserted the equal sign, and now I've got these vowel points, and it will search for just that particular form. So the equal sign tells it, pay attention to the vowel points. All right, so that's the first thing to be aware of with Hebrew searching. By default, vowel points are ignored. The next thing to understand is that Accordance expects by default for you to be entering a lexical form rather than an inflected form. Now, a lexical form is simply the dictionary form of a word, the form that appears in a dictionary, and the inflected form is the form as it appears in the text. So if we go back to our search for bara, you can see I entered the lexical form bara, but I got various inflected forms of bara. I got bara here, created, that's past tense. And then I've got so God created, but this is a vav consecutive because of the vav here, so it takes a different form. And so I've got different forms of that particular word showing up. These are what we call inflected forms. That's the form as it appears in the text. And this is the lexical form, the form that I would look up in a dictionary. If I were to triple click one of these words to open up my default Hebrew lexicon, it's going to search for the lexical form, and that's what I'm going to find. So in the old days, if we had to pull the lexicon off the shelf, we would have to know that the lexical form for Yivra was bara, and then we'd have to go to the lexicon and look up bara. So by lexical form, we mean the form that appears in the dictionary. And it becomes a kind of shorthand for find me every form of that word. So to give an English analogy, if I were to take the word ran, ran might be the form that I see in the text. But the lexical form of ran is run. That's what I would have to look up in a dictionary, in an English dictionary. So this is sort of analogous to typing run and then getting in English ran, runs, running, and every form of that particular word. So when you search, Accordance defaults to lexical forms. If I want to find a particular inflected form, let's copy this and paste it up here. If I hit return right now, it's not even sure what lexical form I'm trying to enter because it's looking at what I pasted in and looking for a lexical form that matches, and it can't find a match. But if I were to go ahead and run this search, it's now going to ask me, we don't understand what lexical form that is. Would you like to do a literal search? And I'll explain that in a minute. Sorry, my daughter is trying to call me repeatedly, so let me tell her that I can't talk right now. So to indicate, no, I don't mean a lexical form here. I really want to search for this inflected form, this form as it appears in the text. I have to put that inflected form in quotation marks. And that tells Accordance I'm looking for that particular word. All right, and now we find Yivra and Vayivra and so on. Actually, that's interesting. Why didn't it find Vayivra? I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it, but we'll look at it more carefully later. But it didn't find it because Accordance automatically inserted the equal sign for me. Let me take that out and let me paste this in again and put this in quotes, and I'll explain to you what's happening in just a second. So I'm going to put this in quotes, but this is where the quick entry can kind of help you, but when you're trying to demonstrate certain things and you don't want the quick entry, I'm going to do escape to get out of that. All right, so this is the form that I pasted in from Genesis 1, whatever it was, and Genesis 1:21. And so now you can see Vayivra gets found because I did a search for that inflected form. Now, when the quick entry chose a different form and stuck the equal sign in, that was actually indicating a different set of vowels, and the equal sign was indicating pay attention to the vowels. So if I want, so right now, even though the vowels are in here, accordance is ignoring the vowels, and it's quite possible. What do we have? 3 occurrences here. In this case, the vowels are all the same, but it's quite possible that the vowels could be different because accordance is ignoring the vowels. Remember, vowels are optional by default. The only way to specify that it shouldn't ignore the vowels is if I include that equal sign. And when you're searching for inflected forms, the equal sign needs to go inside the quotes. All right, so if I put that equal sign in, I get, well, I guess there was one that was different because I get 2 occurrences rather than 3. So perhaps one had a different A vowel on it. But so going back to our document here, just to kind of recap, accordance ignores vowels by default. To specify that you pay attention to the vowels, you enter the equal sign. Accordance assumes lexical forms by default. And to specify inflected forms like yvra, you have to enclose them in quotation marks. And if you want to search for a particular inflected form, enclose it in quotation marks. And then number 3 here, searching for exact inflected forms. That's where I include the equal sign to specify, no, I want those exact vowel points to be found. That's an exact inflected form. And the equal sign has to appear inside the quotation marks. So again, this is all explained here. And you've got links to the searches. So you can just click those links and look at the searches as an illustration. All right, let me pause there for a second, just make sure everybody's still with me. Make sure that I'm not getting a flurry of questions, and then we'll move on. Anybody confused at this point?
Let's see. Are these rules of ignoring the vowels and accents, do they apply to Arabic as well? Because they do not ignore Hamza. Sorry for asking about Arabic. But the points made about Hebrew are very relevant to Arabic.
It should be similar. I'm not familiar enough with the Arabic to be entirely sure. We may have made some modifications for Arabic, but the Arabic will follow the same general model. So I believe it should ignore the vowels by default, and you'll have to do an exact search to include them. But I may be wrong on that.
Okay,
all right.
And that's it. No, that's all.
Okay. All right, so that's searching for exact inflected forms. So basically, the recap of these first 3 points is lexical forms, you don't have to do anything, just enter consonants. If you want the vowels to be paid attention to, for example, to distinguish a lexical form, let me do ayin resh bet, and I'm going to do, well, let's just do that. I'm just going to do an unpointed search for ayin resh bet. So this is searching for any lexical form that has these 3 consonants. And whenever you do a search, you can go to the analytics here and choose a way to visualize your entire search results. So you can see the entirety of what was found. So we've got various kinds of analytics. I'm going to go to the analysis. And this is going to give me every lexical form that was found by this search. So these are all different lexical forms that have the consonants ayin resh bet. And you can see some of them are distinguished by the vowel points. So what's the difference between swarm and sweet? Well, one is arov and one is arev, right? So I could put the vowel points in here and then put the equal sign. And that would say, okay, I just want the ayin resh bet word that has those vowel points. And now you can see I've used this exact search to distinguish this lexical form from all of those others. Now, let's see, I'm not sure this is the best example to talk about inflected forms, because these are probably going to be inflected all the same way because it's a noun. But if I do if I wanted to find a particular, well, let's do this. I'll put quotation marks around this, but take the equal sign out. And that's saying I want to find a rove in that particular form. But I took the equal sign out and it stuck it back in. See, it actually, I can't do things wrong even when I want to. I'm going to take that out and see if I can get that search to go. There we go. So here it's ignoring the vowel points. And so it's finding any inflected form that has the consonants ayin resh bet. So it finds erev, evening, in Genesis 1:5. And these are all the lexical forms that were found by that particular search. Now, this is more of a power user kind of step, but you can take the analysis and you can actually customize the display to see more information. So by default, the analysis lists every lexical form that was found. But if I want to see what inflected forms were found, I can drag the inflect item into that column and click OK. And now I can see for each lexical form what the inflected forms were that were found, right? So here's Arabia, but there's a slight difference in the pointing. And desert, slight difference in the pointing, and so on. So if I go back to my search, because I did an inflected form search, it found all of these inflected forms from various different lexical forms. If I put an equal sign in the inflected form inside the quotation marks, then I find just the 9 occurrences of that particular inflection. So it's important to understand those distinctions when you need them. 9 times out of 10, you're going to do a lexical search without worrying about the vowel pointing. But you may want to do the equal sign to distinguish lexical forms, and if you're searching for inflected forms, then you really may want to include the equal sign. And the equal sign in an inflected search needs to be inside the quotes. All right, I think we've belabored those points enough. All right, another thing to understand about the Hebrew is the concept of morphological separation. Now, that's a big fancy term, and all it basically means is essentially, how do you define a word in Hebrew? If I were to go up to most Hebrew speakers and ask them what's the first word in the Hebrew Bible, most of them would say Bereshit, right? This appears to be one word, right? It's separated from the next word by a space and so on. But Bereshit is actually 2 different morphemes or lexical forms, the preposition ba and then the noun reshit. But because the preposition is prefixed to reshit, it sort of functions not as a separate word, but as a part of a word. So how do you define a word in Hebrew? Is this one word or is it 2? Well, for purposes of searching, it's 2 words. So if I were to copy this and paste it into a search, notice it's bringing up the quick entry and it doesn't know what to do with this. It's saying Bereshit, I don't recognize that lexical form because it's not like any lexical form that Accordance is aware of. If I try to do the search, it's going to ask me, it's going to tell me it can't find this and ask me to do a literal search, which again, we'll get to in a second. But when we're doing a word search, to account for morphological separation, we have to put spaces between the separate morphemes or the separate lexical forms. So we can't write Bereshit as a single word. We have to write it as ba and Reshit. And if I do that search, then I get Bereshit. All right, so the same with Kenegdo. I would have to do K and then Neged, and actually for the O, I can't even do the O. I think, well, let's see. Yeah, it doesn't know what to do with the suffix. I would actually have to enter that as a tag. So sometimes figuring out how to enter a search and account for the way the database separates out the terms can be hard to predict. And so when you're putting together a search, be aware of that need to separate different lexical forms, but also be aware that if you're not sure how to do it, you can, let's go back to, well, let me just paste Bereshit back in. If I do Bereshit and hit return, it's going to ask me one more time, the text you entered can't be found, right? Because I entered the search wrong. I didn't put the space in the right place. Would you like to search with literal search? So a literal search basically just switches the search mode from words to letters, and it searches for that string of letters. And it's not concerned that that's two separate words. It's looking for that string of letters. So this is a more simplistic search. It's not as powerful as doing a word search, but when you see something and you go, look, I just want to find that one thing. Accordance will ask you, do you want to do a letters search or a literal search? Just say yes, and you'll get your result. So doing a literal search, a letters search, is a nice shortcut to make it easier, especially as you're learning the Hebrew database. The other tip that I have, so that's morphological separation and then searching by letters rather than words. Let me give you this other example. Let me copy Otam here. And we've got our analysis here. So this should show us what I want to show you. All right, so let me switch to words and let's do this as a word search. So, well, no, let's do it as a letters search first. So the letters search here, the first occurrence that it finds is ot am, which is the direct object marker followed by the masculine plural suffix. But this is two separate lexical forms. And so a letters search finds it. Now, if I go to Genesis 9, the letters search also finds atem, which is one word, one lexical form. So it will find these three letters, whether they're two separate words or three separate words or, all stuck together or what, or one separate word. So the letters search finds me atam, and then atem, and then it also finds so these are two lexical forms that are spelled aleph, tav, mem. And then it finds me ot with the am at the end. So it finds me the direct object marker with the suffix, which has no lexical form. And it also finds me the preposition ate with a suffix. So the letter search is broader than the word search. The word search is going to only find me lexical forms that have these three letters. And so if you'll watch, this whole section of the analysis, when I hit return, will disappear. Okay, so so that should give you a pretty good idea of the difference between a word search and a letters search. And I've got a tutorial, brand new tutorial on that should say It should say searching letters rather than words, and I copied it and didn't correct it. All right, so then the other shortcut, the other trick that you can use when you don't know how to format a search properly is to have Accordance automatically enter a search. So let's go to Genesis 2:18 again. And let's select this phrase, Azer Kenegdo. Now remember, you have Azer and then Kenegdo, and you saw me just try to do this search on my own, and I tried entering the O, but because it's a suffix and a suffix doesn't have a lexical form, it didn't actually like that. And so how should I have entered the search? Well, I'm going to select Azer Kenegdo, and rather than copy and paste and try to modify the search argument up here in this window, I'm simply going to select this phrase, and then I'm going to go to the Amplify button on the toolbar, or I could go to the Amplify menu up at the top of the menu bar, or I could right-click. There are a number of ways to do this, but if I go to the first item in the Amplify menu, the first item in the Amplify menu is always to search the text that you're currently in for the selection of text that you've made. So the first item is search HMTW4, search the tagged Hebrew. And if I choose that, Accordance opens another tab, and notice how it automatically formatted the search for me. As a word search, with Azer, and it has this number which actually distinguishes another lexical form that's spelled the exact same way, and then the preposition ke, and then neged, and then the suffix tag. So that's how I should have entered the suffix rather than trying to enter the vav there. Okay, so I just learned something about how to create searches in Accordance by simply selecting what I wanted to search for and then letting Accordance do the rest. Or if I were to do Ha'adam Lebado, let's amplify and search that and see how does it divide that. All right, so it separates Ha and Adam, and then the Le, and then Bad, and then the suffix tag. So you can see, it split these two words into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different parts. And so that's a lot to remember in terms of splitting up words and entering tags and all of that. Why not just select something that you're interested in and then amplify it? So that's another really helpful tip for navigating Hebrew as you're learning the search syntax and everything. So that's all summarized here. Notice how it inserted all the right lexical forms, separated prefixes and suffixes, inserted any needed tags, etc. All right, so at this point, we have searched for lexical forms and we've searched for inflected forms, and we've specified whether we want vowels to be considered or not, and we've used a variety of tricks to deal with the morphological separation, even when we don't know exactly how we're supposed to split words up. But now I want to go into how to search for Hebrew grammatical tags. Because the tagging, when we talk about a tagged Hebrew text, the tagging is that not only have these words been split into their separate morphemes, but they have also been tagged with the full parsing information. So I'm trying to remember how to, is it option? Can't remember how to freeze the instant details. No, anyway. When you hover over a word, down in the instant details, you will see the inflected form followed by the lexical form. So that Amar-1, that's the lexical form for Yomer. And then in parentheses, you will see the root, which is sort of a shorthand for related forms, not just the verb, but also the related noun, maybe a related adjective, and so on. And then next you'll see the parsing information. So it's a verb, call, VOV consecutive, third masculine singular. And then you'll see the English gloss and the syntax, that it's a predicate. And you'll even see the corresponding word in the ESV, all down here in the instant details box. That's what I'm reading. So all of that tagging information gives us a lot that we can search. So let's do this. I'm going to do a search for moot. And so I'm going to enter an M, a W, and a T. And we'll just do an unpointed search for now. And we get 1,000 occurrences. This is the word meaning to die. So there's a lot of dying going on in the Hebrew Bible. And the first occurrence is mot tamut. And you have the same word in two different forms, one after the other. And the mot, you can see, is a verb in the call stem and in the infinitive absolute. So let's say that I want to find moot in the infinitive absolute. I can go up here into my search entry box, and if the cursor is not blinking after the word, I would go ahead and click after it to make sure the cursor is blinking after the word. And then I will go up to the search menu, and I'll go to enter tag. And it's important to understand that everything that you need to fill in the search entry box of any accordance window is up there in the search menu. So there's nothing hidden. All of the tags are listed. All of the search commands are listed. Symbols, everything is all. So if you forget what's the symbol for an exact form, an exact search, oh yeah, there it is. It's the equal sign, right? That will mean that it will pay attention to the vowels. So all of this is available in the search menu. I'm going to go to enter tag. And because moot is a verb, I'm going to go to the verb part of speech. And I get this helpful dialog box that lets me choose from a variety of grammatical details. So I'm going to go to the aspect menu, and I'm going to choose infinitive absolute and click OK. And you can see accordance inserts all of this proper search syntax for me. So it inserts a tag that says verb infinitive absolute. The tags are offset by these square brackets. And then it has the @ symbol. Now, what is the @ symbol? Well, I can, again, go to the search menu, go to enter symbol, and you'll see the @ symbol joins a tag to a word. So the @ symbol means I'm not just searching for any form of moot, and I'm not just searching for any word in the infinitive absolute. I'm searching for words that have both of these criteria. So the @ symbol basically says both of these things have to be true in order for you to find a match. So when I hit return, now notice it found mot, but it excluded tamut, because tamut is moot, but not in the infinitive absolute. I wanted moot only when it's in the infinitive absolute, and that's what it found. So you can use a tag to constrain your search. Now, we used the dialog box to enter this tag, but notice that it's all spelled out in English. So I can look at it and I can understand this. I can type in these tags myself as long as I put the brackets and as long as I put the part of speech. Accordance will understand what I'm referring to. So let me change the infinitive absolute. I'll just type call, and let's look for moot in the call stem. And there it found moot in the call stem, right? Now notice now it found mot and tamut because they differ in aspect, but they're the same when it comes to the stem. They're both in the call stem. I could even do call infinitive abs. I think I can do that. And now it will find just mot again. So you can actually type in tag details that you want. You don't have to type them in the right order. If I stick call after infinitive absolute, Accordance will parse what I have and find it. So you don't have to think like a computer to enter these grammatical tags. You can just enter them in whatever order that you want, and as long as Accordance can recognize what you mean. For example, if I were to just enter infinitive, Accordance is going to tell me it doesn't know what I mean, because there are two types of infinitives in Hebrew. There's the infinitive absolute and the infinitive construct. So it needs more information. So if I were just to put a C after infinitive, then that's going to find any infinitive construct in the call stem of moot. All right, so that's entering tags. Now, let me go back to the dialog box, and I'm just going to select all of this, because anything I select, if I do something else, it's going to replace it. So I'm going to go to search, enter tag, and let's go to verb again. And let me explain a few little wrinkles about the dialog box here. We're actually cheating and breaking standard interface guidelines with the design of this dialog box, because you have all of these different options within each of the menus, right? You have all of these different grammatical characteristics, all of these different stems, and all of these different aspects, and so on. Well, what if I wanted to search for any verb, any form of moot in either the call or the hifil stem? Well, if I select call from a pop-up menu and then try to select hifil, it gets rid of call and just puts in hifil, because a pop-up menu is designed to allow you to make one choice among many. If I want to be able to make two or more choices among many, technically what we should be using is checkboxes, and you could come and you could check call and hifil and whatever you wanted. But if we were to have a checkbox for every single one of these items, this dialog box would take up the whole screen, and it would be like finding a needle in a haystack trying to find the grammatical characteristic that you're looking for. So we kind of bent the rules, and we used pop-up menus, because 9 times out of 10, you're only going to want one characteristic out of each of these menus. But notice, if I want more than one, we have this little hint here, shift click for multiple tags. So I've got hifil in the menu. If I hold down the shift key on my keyboard, when I choose call, it kind of kicks hifil out of the pop-up menu, and now I have call selected, but I've actually selected both. And when I click OK, now I have moot in either the call or the hifil. And when I hit return, I end up with 767 occurrences. All right, and let's do our analysis. And I guess I closed my analysis window. So here we showed how we could customize the analysis display. Make that bigger. If I click the gear here and go to Customize Display, before we added the inflected form, notice the default is just to show you the lexical form, but here I'll add the stem underneath the lexical form and click OK. And now I can see the breakdown. Oh, okay, so 629 of these 767 occurrences are in the call stem, and 138 are in the hifil stem. Or we can do other analytics. Let's do a pie chart, and I'll choose stem as what I want to graph. And now I can see the percentage of call versus hifil. And I can even change, count these as a percentage. So 82% of the time, moot appears in the call stem as opposed to only 18% for the hifil. So you can get statistics, you can do all kinds of fancy things with these analytics. Okay, so we have searched for multiple tags. What if I want to search for anything but something? So I'm going to go to enter tag, verb. Let's say that I want to find anything that's not the call stem. Well, notice this checkbox right here. If you sort of draw your eye down that column, you'll see the word not down here. And that checkbox indicates negation. So if I want to find anything except call, I just check that box, click OK. And again, it inserts the right search syntax for me. Now it's getting a little more computery. It's using a minus sign and all of that, but I can still understand, okay, well, minus sign means not. That makes sense. And then I hit return. And you can see it found Hifil, Hofal, Polel, and Polal. And here's the breakdown of all the non-call occurrences of moot. Okay. Any questions at this point before I go on? Okay, then what I want to show you while we've got a few more minutes left before I open it up for questions. Let me go back to just our search for moot. And let's look at this occurrence of mot tamut. Let me get rid of some of this to give us some more space. So here, if you look in the instant details as I hover over, mot is in the infinitive absolute, and tamut is the same word, but in the imperfect aspect. It's still in the call stem, so it's in the same stem and it's the same word, but in the call aspect. Now, if I wanted to find this particular construction, how would I do it? Well, I can certainly select mot tamut and amplify. Remember, we talked about the first item lets me search for anything I select. So this finds mot tamut, and we can see mot tamut is translated as you shall surely die. So this is some kind of intensive or emphatic construction. So we found that with die, but what if I want to see other forms of this construction with other words besides moot? How would I do that? Well, there's really no way to do it from the search entry box because you need a way to define the relationships between these two words. So I'm going to use a special, let's see, here we go. I'm going to use a special feature of accordance called the construct window. And I'm going to show you how to do this the hard way, and then I'll show you kind of how to do this the easy way. The construct window has been around since Accordance version 1, and it is a really powerful way to construct searches, especially complex searches, but to do it in a simple way. Remember, this webinar is how to really simplify Hebrew studies. So the construct window really simplifies complex search tasks. And so what I'm going to do, I've just selected everything in my search bar here. I'm going to go up to the File menu and go to New tab, and I'm going to go down to where it says Construct, and I've got three options: Simple, Greek, and Hebrew. I want Hebrew because I'm working with Hebrew. So I'll choose that, and it will open up a Hebrew construct window. Let me rearrange these a little bit. Let's see if I can. We'll keep this open, but and let me change my display just to show me the lexical forms for right now. All right, so I'm just trying to set up what you're about to see. All right, so the Hebrew construct window is a graphical framework for constructing complex searches. And you can see when I had everything selected here and I opened the construct window, Accordance said, oh, okay, he wants to use the construct window. So it inserted a link command. And what the link command does is it says, you know what, don't look for my search argument here in this window. Look for my search argument in this other window, and then give me the results of that search in this window. So this now becomes like my search bar. This is where I define my search. And I define a search by defining the words that I want to search for. And I do that down here in these columns. Each column represents a different word in my search. So I can define those words by dragging items from this palette into those columns. So I'll drag a verb element into the first column. And I get the same set tag details dialog box that I get when I go through the search menu. I'll choose infinitive absolute from the aspect pop-up menu. And I'll click OK. And then I'll drag another verb item into the second column, and I'm going to specify that this one has to be imperfect. I'm just following the example that I saw here. This was an imperfect. I'll click OK. Now that I've defined the search terms, the words that I want to find, I can define relationships between those words up here with these three items: within, enter, and agree. So I'm going to drag a within above the two columns, and I'll say within 5 words of each other. Hebrew has so many particles and prefixes and suffixes that I want to leave a little room for words like that to slip in. I don't know if they ever do, but I'm giving myself a little bit of cushion. And then I can do the agree item, and I'll specify the ways that these two words have to agree. Well, they agree in lexical form. They're both the same word. And they also agree in stem. So I'm going to check stem. Now, I don't know if stem is, I don't know that these have to agree in stem, but we'll follow our example for right now. So now here you can see I've defined this complex search, and I've done it graphically with a few clicks and drags. So I'm searching for any verb infinitive absolute followed by any imperfect, but they have to be within 5 words of each other, and they have to agree in lexical form. They have to be the same word, and they have to agree in stem. And when I'm done, I can either hit return in this window or return from the construct window. And the results of my search will be displayed here in my search window. And then let me see if I can, come on. Maybe I can't widen that anymore. Let me make that a little smaller. All right, so here is my search result, achol tochel. Notice that's not moot. You may surely eat of every tree in the garden. Mot tamut again. Harba arbeh, I will greatly multiply or surely multiply your pain in childbearing. Yadoa teda, the Lord said to Abram, know for certain. So here we've seen all the different lexical forms that appear in this particular construction. And I can even go to my analysis, which updates for this new search, and I'll sort it to count down so we can see, well, what lexical forms are used most often in this intensive construction. Moot is the big winner, you will surely die, but second to that is to know, to live, to return. Now that one's kind of surprising. You will surely return. Well, in what sense would you use return emphatically or intensively? Well, you know, when I first saw that, I thought, well, maybe that's promises of return from exile. You will surely return from exile. So let's test my theory and see if I'm right. If I go over to the Hebrew construct window again, I can now modify this search to look for the lexical form shuv. So I'm going to grab the lex item and drag it into that first column. And I'm going to type shuv, which is VWB. And since these have to agree in lexical form, I don't have to drag the lex item into this column. We've already specified they both have to be shuv. So I'm just constraining this further. And when I do that search, I get The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. So that's the angel speaking to Abraham. The servant said to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came? So this is Abraham's servant going to get a wife for Isaac. And he says, look, you know, you've bound me by this oath to find a wife for your son, but what if she refuses to come back with me? Does your son then emigrate to marry this woman? And Abraham basically says, no. If that happens, you're off the hook. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they're worried that that Joseph is going to return to them the sin that they committed against him. And if you meet your enemy's ox or donkey going astray, you must return it to him. So there you have an intensive in a command form. You know, you don't like the guy, you're not going to want to return his ox or his donkey, but do it anyway. So really quite a broad range of meanings for shuv, none of which have anything to do with exile. In fact, the closest to my theory was the opposite direction. It basically says, if you return to the ways of the people that you're driving out of the land, then I'll send you into exile. But it's not used emphatically of promises of return from exile. So, you know, we're doing kind of high level research into the usage of this particular construction. And we're doing it all with some simple drags and drops. All right, so that was the hard way to construct a search using the construct window. Let me show you the easy way, and this is a cool, powerful feature of Accordance 13, brand new feature, where instead of building my search, let's see, oh, it's because it's shuv. I just got rid of my construct, so let me go back to moot. All right, so here, this is what I'm trying to get back to, moat tamut. So I knew how to use the construct, and so you saw me drag stuff into those columns, and I made it look pretty easy. But as you're learning the construct, you may go, well, wait a minute, okay, so what goes where and how should I organize this? So the cool new feature of Accordance 13 is I can now select something that I want to find. And just like we can amplify to search for something, we can now amplify to a construct. And you can even amplify and take syntax into consideration and look for a similar phrase or clause or sentence. I'm just going to keep it simple and amplify to a word search. So I'm going to select word here. And notice that it opens up a construct for me automatically and inserts all the information that is attached to these two words, all the tagging information, the inflected form, the lexical form, and so on. So now I simply have to go in and, well, if I do this search, I'm probably only going to find a couple of occurrences where I have moat tamut. But I can go in and I can broaden this search by selecting inflected and lexical forms and just delete those. You know what? I don't want all that. And I can take out the syntactical information. I don't really want that either. I can double click the within and say, you know what, let's make that 5. And I can double click the verb and say, you know what, let's do imperfect, but let's take the call out or the person or the gender and the number. Let's just take all that out so that I just have verb imperfect. Or I can just edit the item here. If I don't want call, I can just delete call. So now I've basically duplicated that construct, except I need to add the agree. The reason that we don't supply the agree is there are just too many possible permutations. What exactly do you want those two items to agree on. And so we left the agree out so that you can specify whatever agreement that you want. But now I can specify stem and lexical form. Now I've built my construct, and it's all relatively easy. Just a few, basically it's easier to take stuff away than to build something from scratch. So that's amplifying from a construct. All right. So the construct window is a really cool feature of Accordance. I'd encourage you, once you master the basics of Hebrew searching, try playing around with the construct window, and you'll find that it enables you to do some really cool things. And let's see, before we break for questions, let me do a couple other things. I kind of did this on the fly, but let's do it again. If I want to look up a word in a lexicon, I can triple click that word, and it will open whatever my default Hebrew lexicon is. I'm going to get rid of my analysis here. So I triple clicked mote, and notice it inserted the lexical form moot and found the right entry. It also inserted the scripture reference that I was in when I triple clicked. And what that does for me is it actually highlights the scripture reference. So as I scroll through, you can see it's kind of hard to see the scripture references, but now I've got those scripture references highlighted. I can also use the hit buttons to go directly to the articles that contain my hits, right? So the references to Genesis 2:17. So triple click to get to your most used lexicon. And how do you specify your default lexicon? Go to the preferences and go to the Amplify preferences, and you can specify your default Hebrew lexicon there. So I have Halot as my default, but I could make it any of these others. If I want something other than my default, let's say I want to look up moat in Nidnet, then I can go to the Amplify menu, and I can go to my Hebrew lexicons and choose Nidot. Nidnet is the Greek lexicon. Nidot is the Hebrew lexicon. So if I want to look it up in Nidot, I can do that. So notice it found moot in Nidot. All right, so that's how to use lexicons. You can also use live click, and you can specify your live click settings to look up, do a lexicon lookup and look a word up in all of your lexicons. And you can do word usage where it will search for every occurrence of that word, so you can do a word study. So if I simply, with live click selected, if I just click moat, it opens up a research tab that looks up moot in all of my Hebrew lexicons. And then it also does a search for moot, not only everywhere in the Hebrew Bible, but in all of my Hebrew texts. So Ben Sira and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Mishnah and on and on. So I can get into a major word study there if I'd like, just with a single click. All right, and one other thing I want to show you is, I began by talking about the advantages of working with the Hebrew directly, and appropriate times. When is it appropriate to bring out something from the Hebrew text, and when is it overkill? Sometimes we can communicate what we find in the Hebrew text without having to say the Hebrew says and intimidating people. But when it's appropriate and when we need to speak or pronounce Hebrew, there's no excuse for mispronouncing it these days, because we've got a really great tool. It's a commentary, and it's an audio commentary. I have it put in a folder where I have my audio commentaries, but it's the Hebrew Audio Old Testament. And you can choose chapters, which will read you an entire chapter at a time, or verses. And these are native Hebrew speakers that will read you the verse. So let me go to Genesis 2:18, since that's where this all started. And I'll click. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this. All right, so so you can hear you've got Hebrew speakers that are pronouncing the entire verse, and so if I want to make sure I'm pronouncing Ezer Kenegdo right, you can hear my American accent versus the there's Ezer Kenegdo. So there's no reason to mispronounce Hebrew. It's when I hear a preacher say, the Hebrew word here is chesed or something like that. That's like nails on a chalkboard to me. It's chesed. Go ahead and say the chesed. And you can use this tool to get the pronunciation. The other cool thing about this tool is you can see some interesting things. When I was doing, let me put the English in parallel here. So I think it's a little bit into Ruth. Not. Sorry, can't. Let's try Ruth 1:14. The mouse I'm using is kind of skitsy. Let's see. Let me go back here. All right. Yeah. Ruth 1:6. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. Well, when I was particularly ambitious, I started reading through Ruth in Hebrew. Now, Hebrew speakers will look down their nose at me and go, "Well, Ruth is easy Hebrew," but hey, that's what I needed. And I was reading through Ruth in Hebrew, trying to translate each verse. And I noticed in 1:6 this interesting wordplay where it says, because the Lord had visited his people, to give to them lachem, bread. And so it's latet lachem lachem, which is kind of a fun lyrical series of words. And so anyway, I thought, well, that sounds really cool. What does that sound like when somebody who reads Hebrew well says it? Right, so latet lechem lachem, right? So it's a really cool little module. I'd recommend you get it, and I think it's currently on sale.
David, we can't hear the audio on that Hebrew.
Okay, I wondered about that. It must be because I've got my headphones plugged in. I don't know.
Yeah, you could take those off, and if you wanted to.
Let me try it without the headphones. I'm not sure if that was any better.
We could hear it. It was pretty It sounded very fast. Is it?
Yeah,
fast?
it's fast.
And
So yeah,
Daniel
you kind
said,
of
Daniel says he has the module and it does sound better than that, when it's not coming through the webinar.
right.
Yeah, when
Yep.
I heard it, it was very distorted. But if anybody would like a sample of it, I'll put my email address into the chat box, and I'll be glad to send you a little clip of it so you can hear it and try it out.
All right. Well, that's all I have to show you. Although I could show you a lot more, but let's stop there and let's take any questions that you may have. Anything that I didn't show you, any itch that I failed to scratch, let me know, and I'll try to show you what I can.
Is there a transliterated Hebrew text available?
There's not a transliterated text, but you can go to the interlinear, and you can choose to view the transliteration like that. So here you've got the va, takam, he. I have noticed some things that are a little off in the transliteration with the interlinear, but it's generally pretty good. And I actually used this, I wrote a blog post about it maybe a year ago, but we were in our family devotions, we do scripture memory. And our youngest son, his Sunday school teacher started having him do scripture memory, and so we basically just decided, well, we'll do the scripture memory that your teacher's assigning, and we'll all learn those together. Well, at one point she gave Genesis 1:1, and we were all so familiar with Genesis 1:1 that we had it memorized without even trying. So for fun, I said, well, hey, I learned Genesis 1:1 in Hebrew when I was taking Hebrew, so let's memorize it in Hebrew. And I tried to teach my family how to pronounce it, but they don't read Hebrew, they don't recognize the letters, so it was, and when you don't know what the words mean and don't even know where the word breaks are, it's hard to learn something in another language when you don't really have a matrix for learning it. So as they were struggling with it, I decided, you know what, let's put the transliteration up in the interlinear and let's see if that helps. And sure enough, it was like night and day. As soon as the transliteration was up, then they got the pronunciation right and memorized it in no time. So it's this kind of stuff comes in really handy, and even for silly things like teaching Hebrew to your kids.
Can you give a sample of working MTLXX? Did you already do that or not?
I haven't. So
okay.
The MTLXX is a, let me hide the interlinear here, and let me add the Septuagint parallel. And then I'm going to open the MTLXX as a separate window for right now. All right, so the MTLXX parallel is, let me make this a little smaller and see if I can narrow this a little bit or widen that. Yeah, there we go. All right, so the MTLXX parallel is a database that was created by Israeli scholar Emmanuel Tov, where he goes through the text of the Hebrew Bible and the text of the Greek Septuagint and gives a word for word, or really it's a phrase by phrase kind of lineup of the text. And so here we can see, let's see, let me get on the right verse. So here you can see Vayomer is parallel with Kai Apen, and Elohim is parallel with Hotheos, and so on. Well, one new feature in Accordance 13 is that Accordance now leverages this database. If you actually own the database, you can hover over a word in the Hebrew and it'll highlight in the Septuagint. Let me put the Septuagint next to the Hebrew. So I can go through. So even if I don't have the MTLXX parallel open, I still can use it and leverage that to see the word relationships. Prior to this, you would have to look at the text and sort of look at the two in parallel and go, okay, well, by Yomer, that corresponds to Kai Apen, but you'd have to do it all yourself. And if you're dealing with unfamiliar words, and let's face it, most of us are dealing with unfamiliar words in the Greek Septuagint in a lot of places, then it could get dicey trying to do that all in your head. Because Emmanuel Tove has done it with the MTLXX parallel, we can leverage that and have this cross highlighting. There's lots of other things that you can do with the MTLXX parallel. You can search the MTLXX parallel. Let's open that back up again. And this is getting beyond the scope of this webinar, and I could do a whole webinar on searching the MTLXX parallel. But let me just give an example here. If I do a search for bara in the Hebrew, I get 54 occurrences. If I come over here and I search the Hebrew for bara in the MTLXX parallel, I get only 28 occurrences. And I'm going to change the show text as to just show me the hit articles, and that'll just show me the verses that were found. And so here we'll see, okay, the first occurrence is bara in Genesis 1:1. Well, that lines up. The next verse is Genesis 1:21, Vayivra. But notice Genesis 1:21 is not shown in the MTLXX parallel because it's Yivra, not bara. The MTLXX parallel, I can't say that very well, is not a tagged text. So when I do a search in Hebrew, it's just searching for those inflected forms, bara as bara, and it's not finding bara as Yivra. But we have a special command called the merge command that lets me actually leverage a Hebrew search in a tag text and use that to search the MTLXX parallel. So I'll just do this real quick, and I apologize because I'm not really explaining everything that's happening here. I don't have the time to do that right now. I think it's this one. But if I do this, nope, it's not that one. I merged to the wrong window. Let's do 2. Yeah, there we go. So I merged to the tab that I had done the search for bara in, and it basically leverages the power of the tag text to show me those results in this untagged tool. And so here it found Yivra because it's doing this search and finding me those places. So here's Vayivra. So it finds me the 54 occurrences. It's actually 55 because there's a variant in there. So that's the merge command. And there's actually a tutorial on, if you go to Septuagint, there's a tutorial on using the MTLX parallel, and there's a tutorial on using merge with the MTLXX parallel. And then there's also a tutorial on comparing the MT and the LXX with the text command. We can now, this is a new feature of Accordance 13, where you can now leverage these kinds of word relationships. We've got these databases like English Bibles with Strong's numbers and the MTLXX parallel that will line up places where the text corresponds. That's where we get all this cross highlighting from. Well, you can use the text command to search for, let's do a text command in the Hebrew, and I will do enter command text, and I'll choose the Septuagint, and then I'll just do a search for poieo and hit OK. Now, what's happening here, what the text command does is it leverages these kinds of databases and lets me search the Hebrew Bible for every Hebrew word, because this is what I'm searching. I'm searching the Hebrew Bible, but I'm searching for every Hebrew word that corresponds to poieo in the Septuagint. And it's using the MTLXX database as the basis for this. And so when I hit return, it's actually going through that database and finding me everywhere that bara, or here is asa, any Hebrew word that is parallel with poieo in the Septuagint. So that's with the text command. So you can do all kinds of really powerful searches by leveraging that MTLXX parallel. That's kind of a crash course, and I didn't take enough time to do that justice, but hopefully that'll give you an idea of what is possible with that resource.
Okay, another question. I'd like to ask how to use Accordance for teaching first-year Hebrew. We use the Practico and Van Pelt book, hard copy, but in the past I haven't used Accordance until the third semester for fear students would use it as a crutch. How can I use Accordance for teaching Hebrew 1 and 2? I'd really like to without it becoming a crutch.
Sure. It's you sort of have to rely on the honor system, but you could, for example, encourage your students to do different things like this. I mean, you can encourage them just to close the instant details and say, you know what, I don't want you using the instant details. I want you trying to parse words on your own, or recognize your vocabulary, and so on. So you can just turn the instant details completely off, or you can actually go into the preferences, and you can go into the instant details preferences and specify the things that are shown in the instant details. So you could, for example, turn off the where is the gloss? The English gloss definition. You could turn that off, and now when I hover, I get everything except the gloss. Now I'm also getting the parallel ESV, so I'd probably have to, let's see, I'd probably have to turn off the English word in the key numbers. Let's see if that'll do it. No.
And I see that Mark mentioned to that person to check out Abram's webinar from an earlier session today. He covered this exact topic. So
okay, great.
So that would be helpful too.
But yeah, so there are all kinds of ways that you can narrow this down so that you're not using that as a crutch. And of course, there's no way to control it on your student's computer, but you can encourage them to use good practices of learning that material.
Okay, and can you discuss the transliterated text from BHSW4 made by Option Command T versus the transliterated text shown in the interlinear? And can you show again how to display the interlinear transliteration?
I understood the second part of the question. I'll have to have you
let's see. It says the transliterated text shown by Option Command T versus the transliterated text shown in the interlinear. Is it different?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm not sure about the option Command T, because I don't believe there's any way to go into the set text display and have it display as transliteration. You would have to display the transliteration in the interlinear. Oh, I know what you're saying. Okay. When you select text and you go to copy as transliteration, that's what you mean. Control Command T. Or in Windows, it would be Control. Well, what's the?
Oh,
I'm not
Windows
sure
would
what
be
the.
Option. I mean, no,
Okay.
Windows would be Alt, I guess. Yeah.
Alt and Control T. So when you do copy as transliteration, what's the easiest way to do this? Let me open up I'll just do a new user tool. Test. All right, so if I paste this text in, we've got something funny with the text sizing going on, but you can see, let's just update it. Oh, it's the title. All right, let's do this. All right, there we go. So here you're getting full transliteration, Bereshit, bara, Elohim, etc., using our Rosetta font, although something seems to be off there, which may be a function of the user tool handling the transliteration. But so that's a full transliteration, and when you copy as transliteration, you'll get that. When you do the interlinear, and the interlinear is this little icon that has a bunch of lines and then a break between the lines. That's meant to indicate interlinear. And so you can do show interlinear, or you can just pick word transliteration. But the transliteration that you see is a simplified transliteration. So you can see you're getting it in mostly English characters. It uses SH instead of S with the hot check over it. And the bara doesn't have the macrons for the long A sound, the comets, and so on. So it's just a simplified transliteration for the interlinear. Okay, does that answer your question? Any other questions?
What tools or resources are in accordance for Old Testament textual criticism?
Let's see. Well, let's just do. I know that there is. Yeah, here it is. Tov's text criticism of the Hebrew Bible is the main thing that we have for Old Testament textual criticism in terms of an overall textbook that would explain textual criticism. In terms of the Hebrew text, you've got the BHS tagged, which has the sigla, and so you can get the variants and so on. So you've got the BHS apparatus available to you. But Tov's text criticism of the Hebrew Bible is the main resource I can think of that covers Old Testament text criticism. We've got lots, and there's such a wealth of material for the New Testament in terms of textual commentaries and all of that is a little more accessible to non-scholars, non-specialists. But for Hebrew, that's about all that I can think of that we have.
And David, I was just answering this as you were talking, and I was thinking also, we've got apparatuses of the VHS and the and also maybe the the infer search that explores intertextuality that would help too.
Sure. And the text search, yeah, you can do all kinds of searches to compare text. That's a great point. And there's also we have quite a few Septuagint apparatuses. So that will also give you a wealth of information. Unfortunately, I'm not scholarly enough to parse a lot of that stuff.
And can you show the interlinear under Hebrew with the English under the Hebrew, I believe is the question.
Sure. So with the interlinear, we call it the dynamic interlinear because you can choose whatever you want in your interlinear. So if I want the ESV with Strong's, and then I can compare a bunch of different translations. Let's do NRSV with Strong's, and so you'll create your own interlinear. Let me just close the English so we can see that. And so you can create that. You can add other things like the English gloss into the interlinear, and so on. And once you create a view that you like, you can actually go down. You can add the MTLXX, for example, as well. But once you find a setup that you like, you can choose Save as New Interlinear, and then give it a name, and that will appear up here as one of your default interlinears. So you only have to set up all those different lines once, and then save it, and then you've got something that you can quickly call up.
Okay. Let's see. The text of the Old Testament, an introduction to the Biblical Hebraica text criticism resource for Old Testament accordance is available. Okay, that was just somebody answering that. Okay, I think that's all the questions then.